Hi, my name's Tim. I'm from Amsterdam, lived in London for the last 3 years, and now in Montpellier to focus a bit more on music and production and being able to get those ideas in my head on paper in the best possible way, as it were. I listen to a lot of electronic music, 60s psychedelia, and love a bit of jazz as well. Now I'm going to be talking about visualizing sound because it's something I knew very little about before, and one of the most interesting things for me is learning about why everything sounds like it does. Anything from plucking the string of a cello to the screen of a TV smashing. Why does it sound like it does? Now, as human beings, our audible range is in the range of 20 and 20,000 hertz. That is to say, 1 hertz, named after Heinrich Hertz, who proved the existence of electromagnetic waves, is 1 cycle per second. So sound travels longitudinally, like this. And as we see it, as the best way to represent a single frequency on an oscilloscope is by a single wave like this. So it's where it gets from one point on that wave to the exact same point again after reaching its peak and trough. We can't hear 1 cycle per second. Lowest is 20 cycles per second. And to put that into perspective, 440 cycles per second, 440 hertz, is what we have decided as a population to put A above middle C at. Didn't always used to be like that before the Second World War, but now it's 440 hertz. And the best way, not that sound, but the best way to represent a single frequency without harmonics on an oscilloscope as a wave like that. And let's have a quick look at how that looks. Now I've loaded a little online oscilloscope here, where you can see each division is set as 1 millisecond. There are 1,000 milliseconds in a second, so if I change the frequency here to 1,000 hertz, we'll get 1 per millisecond. I'll just reduce the gain so it's easier to see. And you have here 1 cycle where it reaches its peak, its trough, and back to its starting point again in that millisecond. That is what is, if that was 1 second, that would be 1 hertz, but it's 1 millisecond, so it's 1,000 hertz, in fact. And you can see as we reduce the frequency, as human beings we would represent that as a lower pitch. A lower pitch just means fewer of those cycles per second, representing a lower sound. Now, very high frequency, very high sound, many of these cycles per second. The way I like to think about sound is, people always say think outside the box. Okay, fair enough, think outside the box, but think inside the cuboid. Now, you've got 3 variables. You've got amplitude, frequency, and time. And now, if you think along your x-axis, you've got time, the long one, 3.5 minutes for a pop song or 5 minutes for a house track or whatever it may be, along the x-axis. Along the y, you've got your amplitude, or as what we perceive as loudness. And along your z, you've got your frequencies. So you've got all 20,000 frequencies along that z, moving along time, and each frequency is varying in amplitude. And the way you create a song is by working with those 3 variables in your own unique way. So if you think of it as a graph, a cuboid graph with 3 variables that you can work along, you can adjust each of those frequencies at any particular amplitude along any point in time that you want. And the way, okay, you can think about that in your head like that, but the way that we look at it in logic is by using a frequency analyzer, which instead of having a 3-dimensional graph like that, time goes on in real time. So you watch what happens as time goes on and as the song progresses. So you can have a 2-dimensional shape with your frequency and amplitude while time is actually passing. Now let's have a quick look how that works in logic. Now what I've got up here is a little tune I've made, and I've brought up the channel equalizer here. So you click here, analyzer, and you can see I've put a little section on repeat. And you can see here, a bit of lag on the computer, but you can see here the frequencies coming through, along from 20,000 as the highest, down to 20 hertz as the lowest. And you can see my kick drum and my bass line on the organ here is coming up as a pretty fat sound there. And little frequencies here, the harmonics of the piano there, each one peaking. The harp, again, fairly close to being single frequencies peaking there, whereas bass is a bit more muffled. But you can see how as time passes, how each frequency's amplitude changes over that time. So you have your 3-dimensional shape there, when you listen to it in real time, being able to visualize it 2D. One of the best ways of looking at equalizing sound.